Hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Apologies for the delayed proceedings. Just trying to recombobulate myself after a little bit of jet lag, but we have 30 seconds to go now until lights out here at Knockhill for round 4 of the AROC Racing League's TCR Championship for 2025. It's Matt Daly, Andrew Whitehead on the front row, followed by Colin Knief, Greg Young on row 2, then it is John Cole, Alan Matthews row 3, Nathan Birch, Miles Davis row 4, Andy Webb, Guy Swarbrick on your 5th row, and then it's Paul Milner and Steve Knight completing our 6th row field for the first bit of racing action here at Knockhill this evening. Our previous round last week with the Historics was fantastic. Hopefully we get some more brilliant action with our TCRs this time around, as we have 6 red lights on the gantry and we are away. Fantastic start there for Andrew Whitehead. Gets a nose out in front with a little bit of wheel spin, but does have the ever so slight advantage, at least running into that first corner. But with the inside late onto the brakes can go Matt Daly, and he ensures that he maintains the race lead as we head into the next couple of corners. Here we go, then it's Matt Daly from Andrew Whitehead. Colin Knief maintaining P3, Greg Young holding it out at P4 as well. John Cole very much under pressure at the moment as Miles Davis takes a bit too much out of that sausage curb, ends up in the gravel. Luckily, doesn't get involved in any other collisions, but an unfortunate way to lose some pace at the very start of this race. I think we actually saw him up onto 2 wheels once more. We did indeed, so Miles Davis enjoying the action-packed sights of Knockhill. We do enjoy Knockhill indeed. Provides some fantastic racing action, as I say. If you haven't seen it already, go back to last week's action and Historics and see just how often a GTA 1750 can end up on 2 wheels more. Either way, 24 minutes to go in this race, and a drag race down the start finish straight between Matt Daly and Andrew Whitehead, with Matt Daly taking a little bit too much into the first corner, goes into the gravel, the back end kicks out, somehow he collects it, doesn't spin round, and is able to keep his rival behind, because as the car went across the circuit there was nowhere else for Andrew Whitehead to go. This means it's Matt Daly still in the lead. Andrew Whitehead runs in P2, and look who's on the scene now. Colin Knief, who we thought might have been embroiled in some battling with Greg Young, is now able to set his sights on fighting, obviously not for the podium, he's already on the podium, but as I suspect it's going to be gunning for a race victory in this race one. Let's not forget that this is, of course, Colin Knief's home race here at Knockhill, effectively. As we run up the start-finish straight once more and into the Duffers Dip, it is Colin Knief's nearest track for himself there, so he'll be hoping to take away some silverware this evening, I suspect. As we can see, it is Andrew Whitehead who loses out the position to Colin Knief there. Now it's Colin running in P2 with a pretty comfortable gap to our race leader. Now this is going to get interesting, I suspect, as we see Colin Knief using as much of the track as he does. Paul Milner having a few issues off into the gravel, as is Andy Webb there. Greg Young drops down into P5, allowing John Cole up on into 4th position. We're actually seeing the dynamic of this battling starting to change a little bit. I thought we might be seeing a bit of a 4-car battle for P4 here. What we are seeing is Andrew Whitehead able to put the pressure back on Colin Knief once more. John Cole running in P4, and then we have Nathan Birch and Greg Young side by side. This is something that we've seen in the past at Knockhill. Don't want to get caught up in these battles. Overtaking opportunities are few and far between, so if you are slowing yourself down in the midst of battles, you are going to find yourself really compromising your race late on, as we can see smoke being kicked up there as Greg Young, having a good start in P4, loses a couple of positions. It goes from bad to worse. Greg Young off and into the gravel. We'll have a look at what that means for our championship in just a moment, but less than ideal for Greg Young, who now finds himself back in the pit, so I suspect his car taking a fairly hefty whack of damage there from that one small instant. There is no real slow part of this track, of course. It's all pretty flowing, all pretty high speed. So it means that this tight, twisty, narrow, well, it's not twisty, it's certainly tight and it's certainly narrow. That does mean that if you head around those few corners there and it goes wrong, you're going to find yourself in a wall at a pretty high speed, a pretty high turn of pace here. Again, apologies, I'm not all with us this evening. Very jet lagged, and I'm being egged on to make certain impressions of certain leaders of supposedly free worlds, and I'm not going to do that just. Don't worry. Either way, it's Matt Daly running in at P1, 1 second between himself and Colin Knief. There, and Andrew Whitehead runs in P3, so it's your top 3 covered by 2 seconds in this race so far. And then we do have another quick succession beginning to form up, being led by John Cole in at P5 here. Great to see John Cole back on our screens. Was a bit of a regular a few seasons ago. Wasn't able to be present for the past couple of seasons, but is dipping his toes back into the world of AROC Racing League which is great to see in that rather fabulous livery once more. We're not... I've delved into plenty of livery chat already early on in this season, so we'll avoid doing so once more here at Knockhill. Yeah, great to see such a wide variety of drivers in their cars back out on the track with us. Matt Daly, I should add, looking pretty comfortable out in the race lead at the moment. We won't spend too much time on him because there's little to report, really, isn't there? It's just 1.5 seconds he finds himself leading this race by. Practice makes perfect here at Knockhill. We know Andrew Whitehead's put plenty in, and he was going very well indeed in the GTA 1750s. He was getting the impression that he might not have the same turn of pace in these WTCRs, but Andrew, it must be said, you're doing a stellar job out there at the moment. He's currently putting pressure on P2 as he heads around Taylor's, the right-hander, up the hill once more. It's crucial to get the momentum and to keep your foot down, to keep that momentum up. It's a little bit less crucial, I suppose, than our GTAs last week. Those cars are all about keeping the revs high, keeping yourself climbing on that cam. That's where all the power is in those cars. These turbocharged, he's got a bit more of that low-end grunt, and it means that if you do have a little bit of an iffy run through the corner, if you scrubbed off some speed, it's not necessarily the end of the world. I mean, these are front-wheel drive as well, so how you approach the corner entry is fundamentally different as well. And if you do whack that throttle on, you're at much less risk in the GTA than you are in the GTA 1750s of just kicking the back end out and finding yourself in a barrier. We're on board with Andrew Whitehead, still in P3 at the moment, has lost a tiny bit of ground to Colin Knief, and the reason for that is Colin Knief is absolutely flying along at the moment. It must be said, I nearly said a 1 minute lap there, but you're not going to see a 1 minute lap. To 51.503 is Colin Knief's last lap. He might be beating that this time around. He goes purple sector 2. He does beat that this time around to 51.145. That is getting very close to the fastest lap over this race so far. Fastest lap, though, does indeed go to Matt Daly. 1.8 seconds is the gap between himself and Colin Knief. And Matt looking pretty happy out there, all things considered. I mean, he certainly can't breathe easy just yet. He's still got some pressure on from just a couple of car lengths behind there. As Colin Knief goes a little bit too deep into the Brabham straight. We saw that on a number of occasions, actually, in the previous round. As you run out of that chicane, you've got those tyre barriers to be careful of, but you try and carry as much speed as possible. But the run onto the Brabham straight is actually quite a tight, quite an oblique right-hander almost. It is still technically a corner, and it can catch you out if you just try and wash out too high, try and carry as much speed as these cars can. You're going to find yourself in the grass. That's what's happened there for Colin Knief. So he does continue on. He is still in P3, but isn't quite putting that same level of pressure on Andrew Whitehead, who I already mentioned, wasn't looking that hopeful, or at least didn't feel that hopeful for this round. In our TCRs at Knockhill, as there is some lapped traffic, currently finding itself at an unfortunate position onto the run-on back to the chicane. Andrew Whitehead could see that coming from a mile away. Luckily, no contact. Did ride over the sausage curb. It will have cost him a tiny bit of pace, but he is at least able to continue on. In fact, it's cost him 2 seconds there. That does, in a way, bring Colin Knief back into the mix here, and Guy Swabiger actually retires from the session. So something going awry with his setup, or things not going quite his way in race 1. So he regroups and is able to get back and get ready for smash for race 2. Whilst we've been looking at the fight for the podium, I should add, it's all going on in the midfield. It's Nathan Birch running in P4, then it's John Cole, a 12-second gap between himself and Matt Daly. Then just behind us, Miles Davis and Alan Matthews as well. Greg Young is still in this race at the lap down, but is still competing at least. But here we are on board with John Cole now. We're going to follow along with the action cam to see how he negotiates Sector 1 and running into Sector 2 here at Knockhill through McIntyre's. And it will be the chicane coming up next. A little bit of a sausage curb, as we've already alluded to. But a little bit of contact actually between Miles Davis and Alan Matthews, so these two seem to have split from the group that we did have fighting for the mid-pack, but now it is just an out-and-out battle between Nathan Birch and John Cole, which is something we've seen in the past, so hopefully we enjoy yet another example of that as they run through Taylor's now. 15 minutes to go in this race. It would be worth having a quick look at how the championship is shaping up in our touring cars, partly because I've forgotten somewhat. Because I didn't have a chance to have a bit of a glance over and a read before we got underway on this stream. It's Matt Daly who currently leads the charge in this race and the championship as well. 126 points to his name. That makes a difference of 7 points to himself and Colin Knief. That will expand if things stay the way that they are currently in this race. Then we have the aforementioned Colin Knief with 119 points. Then it's Greg Young currently running in P11. So this would have been a really important race to try and close up on the likes of Matt Daly and Colin Knief, who so far are absolutely controlling this championship in comparison to everyone else. They are by far and away the most comfortable in the running, as you see Andrew Whitehead and Colin Knief are getting closer once more. Matt Daly will be hoping, though, that Andrew Whitehead does everything in his power to keep Colin Knief at bay. Is he going to be able to, though? I don't think so. There we go, around the outside before we run into Taylor's. Has the inside line here, one of the prime overtaking opportunities on the track, and it's Colin Knief up into P2. Let's see if they continue that momentum as we head on to the start finish straight once more. We approach the Doofus Dip, but you've got to make sure that you get your braking point absolutely perfect. You don't want to be too brave, as we have Steve Knight and John Cole making contact by the looks of things down the start finish straight. There we go. Yeah, it's Steve Knight pointing in the wrong direction there. Hopefully he gets back underway. We run through the Doofus Dip, and it is still Colin Knief ahead of Andrew Whitehead. A very easy corner to get wrong. We did see some GTA 1750 based acrobatics last week where drivers were barreling through the Doofus Dip. It was upsetting the car, kicking it into the air, and then they were pirouetting through the sky. Haven't seen that yet in our Juliettas because they're a little bit more planted, a bit more downforce, but we are seeing the battle playing out once more between Colin Knief and Andrew Whitehead. This time it's a bit of a switch with Andrew Whitehead going down the inside, doing the opposite of what he did do on the previous lap and taking back P2 in this race. As I say, a bit of a prime overtaking opportunity on this lap, and there we go, demonstrated well by Andrew Whitehead. Into turn one we go. Andrew Whitehead maintains the lead of this battling duo, which is exactly what Matt Daly wants to see, with Matt Daly running in the lead of this championship and very little points separate himself and Colin Knief. So every point that Andrew Whitehead takes away from Colin Knief only benefits Matt Daly, so he'll be hoping that Andrew Whitehead can maintain his run in P2. Andrew Whitehead is currently in P4 in the championship with 50 points. A little bit fewer than perhaps we would have expected from the first 6 races we've completed so far. Obviously, 3 rounds, 6 races completed. This will be race number 7 of the series. And yeah, only 50 points from that so far. So Andrew not quite got the same confidence in the TCR that he does in the GTA 1750, but hopefully with race weekends like this, that confidence will pick up, because at the moment he has the measure on home hero Colin Knief and has 50 points to his name. He'll be hoping to separate away from the likes of Nathan Birch, 48 points in 5th, Miles Davis 42 in 6th, Alan Matthews 40 in 7th, John Cole, Jack Hodson, Mike Hilton, Andy Webb, Andy Craker, Paul Millman, Alex Smith and Steve Knight are your runners in the championship. And unfortunately for Andrew Whitehead, he does go too deep onto the exit of, that was actually the exit of McIntyre's there. We went into the gravel before we head into the chicane. It all goes very wrong for Andrew Whitehead. A bit of commentator's curse there, just as I was singing his praises, doing a fine job of picking up the pieces in the championship. It all goes wrong. So apologies for that one, Andrew. But that means it's now Colin Knief in P2. It's still Andrew in P3, just a few seconds separated. And then we have Alan Matthews, Nathan Birch and John Cole all providing a bit of a battle beginning to brew up here as we head down the railway straight once more. We've passed halfway race distance in this race now. If you are watching along at home, I know, apologies, the stream was a little bit delayed, so if you've got any friends or family who might be wanting to watch along and wondering, oh, well, the stream wasn't up, I do apologise, just got online now, so do make sure that you share it around with your friends, with your family, anyone you might think might enjoy some Alfa Romeo sim racing action. Do get your comments in, any questions, queries or comments that you do have. I do monitor them, so do get them in and I'll make sure to get an answer to you if and when I can. As John Cole having a couple of issues out on track, a race that was really promising at various points, not quite shaping up the way that he would have wanted. Currently running in P7, so some decent points still to be taken away to add to the 24-point tally. He would have hoped a little bit more as we had. As I mentioned, we've already crossed the halfway race distance in this race, and Matt Daly is still your race leader with a 5-second advantage. here we go, just over 7 minutes to go in this race. Now, Matt Daly still leads our charge, 6.3 seconds the gap between himself and Colin Knief. And then we have Andrew Whitehead running in at P3. 10 seconds is the overall spread between our drivers currently within the running for a podium. And then there's a little decent gap, although huge, between Andrew Whitehead and Alan Matthews. 25 seconds is Alan Matthews off the race lead, I think in P4 at the moment as well. Then we have Nathan Birch, Miles Davis, John Cole, Andy Webb, followed by Paul Millman, Greg Young, Steve Knight, and then Guy Swarbrick did jump back in the end. Great to see, so I suspect some type of technical issue. Hopefully that's resolved for him, and he's getting ready for the reverse grid race coming up in just a moment. In terms of pace out on track, then obviously Knockhill, you get pretty wide open throttle for a lot of this venue. Maybe not quite as much as our historic GTAs, where there's less power on boards and you've got carburetors. They're going to be less fuel efficient. Probably not. The fuel burn is probably not quite as atrocious in these modern turbocharged cars that you're also not on throttle as much for, power, etc. Let's see what the pace is looking like at the moment. I can tell you the fastest driver out of everyone so far on this track is a driver who didn't have much confidence. It's Andrew Whitehead with a 50.971. He eclipses Matt Daly by around about 300ths of a second to take the fastest lap of this race overall. In terms of current pace, though, that accolade also goes to Andrew Whitehead. Andrew Whitehead currently running with 51.2, so it's a few tenths of a second faster than the likes of Colin Knief or Matt Daly. I want to give a mention as well to John Cole, who is currently down in P7, still some points for taking there, but he's actually still setting personal best sectors on last lap 2.0, and it for John Cole, because he's flying along at the moment, doing his utmost to close up on the likes of Miles Davis, but just a little too far back to make that major difference towards the end of this race, unless we have any unforeseen incidents at the track. Running there for John Cole, ends up into the grass, can continue on, but is now down by a lap. So 4 minutes to go in this race, still on for some points, but not in the position I'm sure he wanted. Does put him in a prime position though for the reverse grid action. We know John Cole's got some decent pace underneath him, and as we head into the reverse grid race, it's your top 7 from race 1 results that are flipped and sent on to the grid. So if you finish P7 in race 1, you're on pole for race 2. If you finish P1 in race 1, P7 on the grid for race 2 as well. So could get very interesting indeed with those drivers who have had a little bit of misfortunes in this race, perhaps having their fortunes turned around and ready for our second race of the evening. I believe Nathan Birch and Miles Davis have had a fairly big shunt together. They have indeed. A pretty big impact between those two drivers. Let's see if we can catch whereabouts was that. Well, I didn't quite catch where it was. In fact, yes I did. What a surprise. It's through the sausage curbs and the tyre walls, going through the chicane before you're onto the Bradbury Straight. That's not too much of a surprise now, is it? Nathan Birch running in P5, Miles Davis in P6. A bit of a field spread there. That now only means, obviously, it's quite easy to lap here at Knockhill. It's only a 51-second lap. And as I mentioned, it can be quite instant prone. But that now means only 5 of our drivers are on the lead lap of this race. We have the majority drivers not on the lead lap and 5 running just about on that lead lap. It could be 4 if there are any further issues with some of our drivers. But there's less than 3 minutes to go, and it's still Matt Daly who leads by around about 5 seconds. That gap hasn't changed over the past 15 minutes or so. Colin Knief running in P2, then we have Andrew Whitehead. Here we go, the timer is about to hit 0 on this race. All looking pretty settled now, all looking very understeery for Andrew White as he ran through Taylor's there. We're on board with Matt Daly as he has now started the final lap of this race. Running through into McIntyre's in just a moment, has a bit of lap traffic to negotiate here at Knockhill, a very tricky venue to deal with that lap traffic, of course, with being so tight, twisty and narrow. Looking at everyone very courteous here in the AROC Racing Leagues in allowing fellow competitors through. And there we go, less than 5 seconds is the gap between Matt Daly and Colin Knief, but that does not provide too much challenge for Matt Daly. It was all done in the first couple of laps for him, really, all looking pretty comfortable indeed for the yellow liveried car there. Fought well in qualifying and will start well in the racing as well. Matt Daly takes your checkered flag, takes race 1 victory. Nathan Birch runs a home P5. Then we have Colin Knief rounding out in P2, and then just behind is Andrew Whitehead completing your podium for P3 as well. It will be Alan Matthews in just a few moments across the line, as well as a few lapped competitors. Let's see as Alan Matthews heads on through Taylor's once more. Up the hill we rise, and it will be Alan Matthews coming across the line in just a few moments' time here. Has some traffic to negotiate, but does not phase him as we see him coming home P4. Then it's Nathan Birch P5, Miles Davis P6, John Cole P7, who's taking an interesting run through the toughest dip there. Then we have Andy Webb P8, Greg Young P9, Paul Millman your top 10 at your point scorers. Then we have Steve Knight P11 and Guy Swarbrick completing the field in P12. So then, that brings an end to race 1. We'll catch you in just a few minutes as we get ready for race 2, the first grid race. And here we go then, ladies and gentlemen, back on the grid here at Knockhill and ready for race 2. Our reverse grid race is just over a minute away from commencing. So on your pole, it is John Cole, followed by Miles Davis. Then we have Nathan Birch, Alan Matthews on row 2. Then we have Andrew White Conklin for row 3. And then it's Matt Daly, your race winner from race 1, completing the top 7. That is then followed by Andy Webb, Greg Young, Paul Millman, Steve Knight and Guy Swarbrick. That's your 12 cars competing in this evening's race 2. And hopefully get some more brilliant racing at Knockhill. Knockhill's always a personal favourite of mine. Brings us fantastic action. It's a tricky one for the drivers to get right as well. Plenty of technical twisty corners, as well as those lovely high speeds with very little runoff as well. Something for everyone. And it is a true test, no matter what car you bring here. Just over 15 seconds then until lights out. It's going to be John Cole versus Miles Davis battling out as they run down towards turn 1. Toughest dip where we have seen so many races made and broken as well. But we do have 6 red lights on the gantry. The revs are rising. We are eager and ready to go for race 2. We are away and running down towards the first corner of this evening. It is going to be pretty level pegging between Miles Davis and John Cole. John Cole just about edging out in front and taking turn 1 with plenty of speed. It turns out to be a little bit too much speed. This means that John Cole now hangs around the outside after a slight excursion and finds himself dropping further back as well into P3, and that was not going the way that perhaps John Cole would have wanted. Alan Matthews was running down the inside there. Oh dear, that is Miles Davis, your pole sitter from race 1, now finding himself all the way down in P11, pirouetting through the air, is able to continue on. It's our front row then from the start of this race, finding himself in 11th and 12th. This now means that it's going to be Alan Matthews versus Nathan Birch running through Taylor's towards the end of the lap once more. Look who's on the scene now, is Andrew Whitehead, just ahead of Matt Daly. Now this is going to be really crucial for this race for Andrew Whitehead. He needs to try and find a way past Nathan Birch and Alan Matthews before Matt Daly is able to do that as well. If he can use Nathan Birch and Alan Matthews as a bit of a barrier, he can keep Matt Daly distracted for at least a few laps. But that is going to be a big bit of contact between Andrew Whitehead, Alan Matthews, Nathan Birch, all involved there. It was actually Matthews and Birch who had a bit of a tagging running through that first corner. Alan Matthews still off the circuit. Matt Daly's involved in that as well, spun around, as is Andy Webb off the track now as well. It's all got very chaotic, folks, as we head back onto the Brabham Straight. All just about, I think, pointing in the right direction. Things couldn't be going better, really, for Andrew Whitehead. Andrew Whitehead now leading us by around about 0.8 of a second. That's ahead of Nathan Birch, who already has shown some decent pace in race 1. We'll be hoping maybe to pick up a few more points, a little bit more points of reference, a bit more braking zone tips, shall we say, from Andrew Whitehead, our race-leading car in front. If Nathan Birch is on the scene there, he can pick up a little bit more about the circuit. Might find himself just gaining that little bit extra speed, even more so than race 1. But it's Andrew Whitehead who leads us, half a second between himself and Nathan Birch. Nathan Birch actually closing down as we run on through towards the chicane in just a moment. And there's a bit of gap back to Colin Knief. Greg Young is running in P4 as well, so a better start to this race for him. And then Guy Swarbrick running in P5. This is a massive turnaround in fortunes for Guy compared to race 1. Hopefully he can keep this momentum up and get some decent points on the board. That would make a nice difference to the driver who hasn't actually scored a point in this series just yet. So if he can kick off the bank in P5, that will see himself as well in the standings. John Cole then, obviously starting this race on the front row, finds himself in P7. And then we have Miles Davis currently finding himself in P10. That is ahead of Matt Daly, who's all the way down in 12th. So this reverse grid race was looking very good at one moment. It was actually pretty high up in the order. Just a couple of laps later, finds himself in plumb last. Matt Daly. Here we go, 20 minutes on the clock in this race. Andrew Whitehead leads us ahead of Nathan Birch and Colin Keefe, who are in the midst of battle as they run through Taylor's at the moment. No change in position just yet. Nathan Birch clawing on to P2 though, but what a tall order to try and keep Colin Keefe at bay. Colin Keefe certainly knows his way around this circuit, knows his way around these cars, knows his way around winning a championship, let alone winning races. So it will be a very tall order indeed to keep Colin Keefe at bay. Nathan Birch leads this charge, heading to a slightly narrower part of the lap now, where, as we've seen, it's a definite pinch point. It can be very tricky indeed to head through these a few corners without instant on your own, never mind. But when in battle with the car, but these two drivers do navigate it well and head on to the railway, not so straight. Taylor's complete the lap, only separated by just a few car lengths, about 0.4 of a second. Alan Matthews finds a way past John Cole. Yeah, these two probably scrapping it out for the second spot on the podium, and perhaps more importantly for the chance to run and fight for the race lead in this one. Actually, the back end looking a little bit uncomposed on the run. Oh dear, there, that is going to be Nathan Birch up onto the sausage curb. That's cost him some speed, cost him some time, but is actually still ahead of Colin Keefe. So we run through the chicane, head on to the Brabham Straight. Nowhere for Colin Keefe to go, so it's still Nathan Birch running in P3. Nathan Birch in P2, Colin Keefe in P3. Then we have Guy Swarbrick, who was having a great run in this race, all the way up in P5, P6. Has a really unfortunate incident at the Duffer Stip, a part of the circuit which, as Andy Webb demonstrates, has caught so many drivers out in the past couple of weeks worth of racing. Guy Swarbrick is another victim of that and brings an end to his race after doing so well. So what a shame to see that. But Andrew Whitehead still leads us ahead of Nathan Birch, ahead of Colin Keefe, and these two could be fighting quite wild in this race, I suspect. Which is all the more welcome, as Nathan Birch potentially already beginning to struggle with some understeer issues, I would say there. That car's a little bit unsettled, it must be said. He's having to soar at the wheel quite a bit in order just to make sure he can navigate around the corner. Here we go on the start-finish straight once more, having a look into the Duffer Stip. It's perhaps even closer than it was previously. We dive down those first couple of corners. Colin Keefe not able to find a way past just yet. As we've already seen with so many drivers, you don't want to try and push too hard through the first half of this lap, because it's not like, you know, if you, say for example, you go too late on the brakes. Taylor's, we haven't seen these two drivers emerge. There they are. There we are, and in fact, Colin Keefe heads on through the right-hander chicane, takes the position. Nicely done. Sorry, that was actually heading through Clark there, but nicely done by Colin Keefe. Nathan Birch is going to try and find a way back past, but unable to do so. And that means that we do now have the two 939 Corsa cars in succession. It's Nathan Birch, head of teammate Greg Young. Run side by side, Colin Keefe and Nathan Birch scrapping it out. Having a look around the outside as Nathan Birch goes late as he dares onto the brakes. A fantastic move around the outside into the Duffer Stip. Not every day you see that, folks. Brilliant stuff from Nathan Birch, catching champion Colin Keefe out. I don't believe Colin was going to quite see that move was on. What a move that was. And I'm sure Colin Keefe is also in equal amounts of awe as I am. That was brilliant stuff from Nathan Birch. Colin has another look around to see if he can find a way past. Not able to do so just yet. And this battle for P2 rages on, and in fact it becomes a three-car battle for P2 as we head around the railway straight once more into Taylor's. Are we going to see the same move replicated in just a few seconds? We will find out, as one of the features of Knockhill I absolutely enjoy is just how short the lap is. We get to see the same overtaking opportunities presenting themselves once more. So let's see as we head onto the start-finish straight. Colin Keefe closes up in the slipstream, has a look around the outside. It's well boxed off though by Nathan Birch, and Nathan Birch heads on down the Duffer Stip, running in P2 still. As I was saying, it's the first half of this lap you don't want to push too hard, because what you will do is you'll find yourself ending up into the gravel there and losing time as Nathan Birch nearly did so. There is Matt Daly heading on through chicane. Let's see if we can catch Nathan Birch once more. Here he is, running in P2, just ahead of Colin Keith, and Greg Young is very much on the scene now as well. These guys are slowing themselves down with their battling. I mean, no complaints from myself in terms of battling. It's great stuff. In terms of their race, they need to keep the battling at bay. But look at that. Colin Keith trying to move around the outside. Didn't work. That gives Nathan Birch the better run potentially. No, Colin Keith, by hanging it around the outside, has a bit more track to play with. Gets on boost, keeps the speed gaining, and heads into the Duffer Stip with nearly 3 wide briefly. There's no contact between the two, but it looked like there was going to be, and it is Colin Keith running in the P2 now. But now we have teammate rivalry in a fight for the final step, final opportunity to get on to the podium. So let's see how Greg Young plays this. Obviously, he wants to see the other 939 Corsica squad car do well. But ideally, he'd like to see it doing well. Just a position or two behind him, I'm sure. He'd like to make sure that he is the driver to take away that spot on the podium, but doesn't want to take each other out, I'm sure. As I was mentioning, though, all their battling could be slowing themselves down. Andrew Whitehead, who obviously struggled in race 1, his fortune very much turning around for race 2, finds himself with a 7-second lead in this race. That is bigger than we saw with Matt Daly in race 1, and is looking comfortable out there. Colin Keith, Nathan Birch and Greg Young slowing themselves down a little bit with that fantastic battling, and Andrew Whitehead controlling things nicely. over 5 minutes to go in this race, and we are watching the battle between Colin Knief, Nathan Birch, and Greg Young still continuing on. I mentioned Colin Knief, and he has split off from the pack somewhat, shall we say. He's now only 3 seconds behind Andrew Whitehead, so it's more than halved the gap between himself and Colin Knief. Stephen Knight having a couple of issues, gets back on track though, but Colin Knief, Nathan Birch, Greg Young, who we were looking at before, they're battling somewhat changed. Nathan Birch maintains his run in P3 for the time being, but very much under threat from his teammate as we head up into Taylor's. Now, Nathan Birch is going to have it all to do to try and keep the experienced Greg Young at bay for the next few laps, the final few laps of this race. Matt Daly is the driver I did want to have a look at. Actually, obviously, was plumb last for quite a little while in race 2 here. Has been able to pick up a few pieces and undo some of that damage, so it is on for some points at least, but not at all what he needed in that championship fight. In terms of the championship fight, let's have a look at how it is shaping up whilst we look at Nathan Birch and Greg Young enjoying their battling. In fact, Greg Young finding a way past Nathan Birch now as we head through the chicane. It is Greg Young who pushes on too hard though, and as we head through, Clark is actually going to relent and give the position back to Nathan Birch. This is a fantastic bit of squabbling between this duo. Run up through Taylor's though, it's Nathan Birch in P3, Greg Young running in P4. And I'm sure we're going to see that fight continue on, but it's Matt Daly with 151 points to his name, still leads the championship fight. It's Colin Knief running in P2 with 137, which means as it stands, it is in fact going to be Colin Knief who closes up that gap completely in the championship standings, and is going to be level pegging with Matt Daly as we head into round 5 in a fortnight's time. Then we have Greg Young and Andrew Whitehead, 85 and 65 points respectively. So as it stands, Andrew Whitehead will very much close down on Greg Young in the championship standings. Then we have Nathan Birch on 58 points, so he'll be hoping to try and close up on his teammate and current rival Greg Young. And then we have Alan Matthews 52, Miles Davis 50, John Cole, Jack Hodson, Mike Hilton, Andy Webb, Andy Quaker, Paul Milman, Alex Smith, Steve Knight and Guy Swarbrick, your standings for this evening's racing. No points once more for Guy Swarbrick, unfortunately DNF'd from race 2 after race 1 didn't go his way. Well, so hopefully better fortunes at a, shall we say, slightly less demanding circuit than Knockhill. Knockhill, that is no slight on any driver in our AROC racing leagues, but it really is testing. It is Knockhill. It's so unforgiving, as I've mentioned so far once more. And you are going to be pretty much race over. But let's have a look at the front end of the pack once more. Nathan Birch and Greg Young are still very close indeed, but so are increasingly close Andrew Whitehead and Colin Knief. 2 seconds is the gap between these two drivers. Colin Knief is around about half a second lap faster at any given moment on this track. Run up through Taylor's with Nathan Birch and Greg Young as they squabble once more. Yes, Colin Knief is hunting down Andrew Whitehead. The question will be if he has enough time left in this race to find a way past and take victory. Here we go though, side by side into the toughest dip. It is Nathan Birch versus Greg Young, and it's still too close to call rather between any of these two drivers. Really impressive running between these two. Go side by side, running down the railway straight. Having a look up the inside, though, is going to be Greg Young. Is this going to be the final time that this move is sealed? Not too sure. We've still got around about 3 laps to go in this race. Greg Young has the momentum onto the straight. Nathan Birch benefits from a potential slipstream and could have the upper hand to get into the toughest dip. Takes a tighter line through the first part of the corner, but it's too little too late, I suspect, for Nathan Birch, who remains in P4 for the time being. We have seen these two trade blows and swap positions on a number of occasions so far in this race. Equally close, so between P3 and P4, it is Colin Knief and Andrew Whitehead. As we head through Taylor's up onto the start-finish straight we go. There's some lap traffic to contend with. Does that have any influence on the race? Paul Millman very courteously dives out of the way to allow the two front runners pass through. That's very considerate of him. Thank you very much, Paul. But it is going to be Andrew Whitehead who continues on half a second ahead of P2. Nathan Birch, meanwhile, appears to have settled himself in P3 because Greg Young's had issues out on track. He's now behind Alan Matthews, a few seconds behind as well. So that brings an unfortunate end to that battle, as we are now very much on the penultimate lap of this race. 10 seconds left on the clock, which means that this will be the penultimate lap. We head round for one last time as we come across the start-finish line once more. Here we go, though. Down the railway straight into Taylor's we go, and rising up the elevation. 0.3 of a second is your gap as we now start the final lap of this race, and it all comes down to this, folks. 29 laps have been completed so far. A battle for the race lead would seem pretty settled for 95% of this race. As I say, it all comes down to this now. Half a second gap between the two, and Colin Knief, as we said, has shown some really impressive pace late on in this race. Has had, as I say, about half a second advantage there or thereabout compared to his rival Colin Knief. Let's see if he can use that pace advantage one last time to try and find a way past. It would be an impressive feat if he is able to do so. We are on this final lap now. Just one big corner to go, and that is going to be Taylor's. It's Andrew Whitehead who heads up the start-finish straight hill once more, in the lead, in charge of this race, and it looks to be that it's going to stay that way with 3/10 separating them. It is going to be Andrew Whitehead finishing ahead of Colin Knief for P1. Colin Knief comes home P2, and then we have a little wait for P3. But what a finish there for Andrew Whitehead, who didn't have the most confidence in this car, who has not had the best start to the touring car season, finds himself winning at Knockhill, and this will be a huge benefit for his championship charge. Then we have Nathan Birch, after a fantastic battle with Greg Young, will come home to round out the podium in P3 in the end. Alan Matthews got very close there, too little too late, unfortunately, so with P4. Then we have Greg Young coming home in P5 ahead of John Cole. There's we see Andrew Whitehead getting up on 2 wheels. John Cole will be coming home P6, last of one of the lead lap drivers to do so. Then we have Matt Daly, bit of a recovery race there to take away a few points at least, comes home in P7. Then we have Andy Webb P8, Miles Davis P9, Steve Knight P10, and Paul Millman, last of your classified drivers there. But that brings an end to the evening's racing at Knockhill. Thank you very much for watching this evening, and we'll catch you in a fortnight's time for the next touring car action, and in a week's time for the continuation of the AROC Racing League's Historics Championship. So thank you very much for watching this evening, and a good night.